Good evening. I know it's a couple minutes before 7. We're going to go ahead and crank this up because it's going to be a long night. Welcome to the Chamber of Commerce Forum. We asked for people to come and we got 100% attendance, and so we appreciate that. Let's start out by telling what the rules are going to be. Very simple. This is not a debate. It's a forum. We ask that you be in front of the microphone so that you can be heard in the back and the TV can pick you up. It's not the best system in the world, but if you get close, you can hear. Each candidate on the federal and state level that are from out of town will get 7 minutes. The local candidates will get 5. We really would appreciate it if you would stick to that time frame because we have a lot of people that want to speak tonight. That's pretty much the rules. Anchorage will be down here in front. She's a Hart County police officer, so when your 7 minutes are up. Did you bring the taser with you, Kay? Okay. But keep an eye on that. So that's basically the rules. It's a very informal night. We plan to do this again prior to the general election when the field gets narrowed down. But this gives you an opportunity to meet the candidates, and we appreciate them being here. So let's pause now for our invocation. Rather than saying a prayer, let's have a few moments of silence in memory of the 4 young girls at UGA that lost their lives, and for their families, and for the families of anyone who's had to bury their child. So bow your heads. Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over here. Join with me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, but you may be seated. We're going to crank this up right at the top, and we're going to start out with District 9 representatives, and Bernie, you're first to go. Bernie Fontaine. If I leave that up there, will that bother you?
No. Well, thank you for being here. I really enjoy coming back here. I was here 2 years ago, and I was treated so nicely. I've told people ever since then that Hart County has a heart. And maybe a play on words, but it's also a fact. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, but most of what I have is in this brochure. If you don't have one, we have plenty to give you. I'm a 30-year Army veteran. I'm a veteran of the Vietnam War, obviously. And after I put in 30 years, I taught political science for a while, became a county manager and so forth. But instead of, like I said, going into any great detail, let's talk about what the situation is that we're here. And I'd like to use a little analogy. I was thinking about this last night when I should have been sleeping. Yeah. What we have here is the situation is very similar to when we have a traffic problem and we complain about it all the time and we know that something needs to be done, but we really don't do anything. And then somebody gets killed. You know, we have a fatal accident. And then we really get on the bureaucrats to do something. Well, we're at that point with our federal government, I feel. And the near fatal accident that we have is called Obama. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody here, but we are in a real fix thanks to the way the country has been going downhill, and it needs fixing. And what we need is a traffic light, okay? What we need is a light on the hill, if you will. And what we need also, and we will be talking about this, is we need to take the patient, which is our country, and it has had a lot of trauma, is the way I say it, and it needs fixing, and it needs to be carefully fixed, very carefully fixed. You will hear a lot of rhetoric from time to time about let's get rid of this and let's get rid of that. The problem I have with that is that I have worked inside a government for 30 years and I know the government. What will happen is if a law is passed, you think, well, this is a good thing. What happens next is not a good thing. It's put in the congressional federal registers and the bureaucrats take over and they put together what's called statutory law. Okay, and that's what is killing our businesses, and it is taking away your freedoms and so forth. An example of that, for instance, one that you all know about, is they want to take control of the mud puddle in your backyard. You know, the navigable waters, it's the Corps of Engineers, and that is the civilian Corps of Engineers. The military guys are okay, trust me, because I used to wear that uniform. But there's a big civilian establishment, and the EPA is another big establishment, and it really works on you and me and everybody else. And the problem is all tied together, because that keeps our economy from working, along with a few other things like the tax situation, which we will be talking about. But we need to get away from this debt that we have, and there are a number of things that need to be done. It's going to take some leadership, and that's the one thing that we don't have in Washington. There is no leadership. There's going to be a big change coming up. I think we're going to witness a historical change. The new people coming in, and those that might make it back, will have what I call religion. They will have been talked to by the people. And that is the opportunity to make the changes to what we call the establishment. The establishment makes it very, very difficult to get anything done. I have 3 minutes left. You're too kind. Usually we get 3 minutes total time. Tell us all you know in 3 minutes. So, guys, we can do better here. Okay. What we have to look at here is, that's the situation that I've described. What's the mission? What are we doing here? Okay. We have 5 people running for 1 seat. There's 1 right answer. There's 5 people running. The way I break it down, and obviously it's not that same way, it's not broken the same way by everybody else, but we have 2 career politicians running. Now, if you like what you've had over the last few years and you want to keep doing what you're doing and you expect different results, there is a definition for that, but I won't go there. You could go that route. The other route is there are 3 citizen candidates. Now, I'm here to tell you that you could talk to any one of them, and I will guarantee you that they will not. They are all good people, and I have stood up, and I will stand up again. If anybody wants to, bash him, like one was bashed, and say, well, how can I believe you? Well, the reason he can believe is because he's a good man, right? These are good people. Actually, we all good people, but we have different orientations, and that's where we're coming from. So, in looking at the 3 of us, what I would say is that what you're doing here is the same thing that you would do, and I have done many, many times, is hiring somebody. We're hiring a congressman. Think of it that way. It's not a popularity contest. It's not who I like and who I don't like. We hear that a lot. And unfortunately, what we need to do is look at what our country needs, not what we like. So look at the candidates, look at their qualifications, and decide who can possibly do the best job. So that's what I say. And I will not use up my full time. I will yield, as they say in Congress, to the congressman. But I would ask you to remember one thing. Don't complain. Vote for Fontaine. Thank you.
I did want to tell you, I should have told you up front, we probably won't take a break. So if you need to go to the restroom or something, feel free to go at any time. And I do want you to know that the Chamber of Commerce takes no position on which door you go in. Michael, you're up, buddy. Michael's,
Scupine.
Scupine. I had practiced it and still blew it. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Mike Scupine, and I'm running for Congress. Why am I doing this? Well, my wife asked me that, and I honestly felt like I was led to do it. after a trip we took down to Disney World. I've been praying about it and trying to decide if I wanted to do this. At that point in time, nobody had stepped up to run against our sitting congressman. And I was very upset with the way he voted on the omnibus bill. But before I get into all of that, let me give you a little bit of history on me. I have several degrees. I have an AE degree in architecture. I have a BBA in economics. I have a Master of Science in Technology Management. I've been an adjunct professor at North Georgia College and State University, teaching managerial courses. I've been a small businessman nearly all my life. Longest job I had, I guess, was a land surveyor. I had my own land survey business in Dahlonega, Georgia, and also in Gainesville. And I owned a gift store at one time. I have also been involved directly in building and in developing subdivisions. So I have some history with the EPA and some of the problems that you get into as a small businessman, some of the requirements and some of the regulations that need to be done away with. Most of them are more of a hindrance than they are a benefit to society as a whole. But back to why I got into this thing. Folks, I never wanted to go to Congress. It's never been a desire of mine. But watching the votes for the last 4 years of our sitting congressman, I finally had enough and had to step up and do something. I'm also the founder of Lanier Tea Party Patriots in Hall County. There was no Tea Party around, and I wanted to get involved trying to change our nation the direction it was going. And when I couldn't find anybody to join, I just found some friends and we started it. And that has been one of the main things that led us to watching his voting record. This is not a personality contest. Doug is a person, I like him a lot. He's a good guy. I enjoy being around him. We cut up together. But I just don't like the way he votes. And the omnibus bill was the final straw for me. There is so much in that bill that were bad. So many votes that he's made up there that were just simply bad. Just to give you a few of the ones that I want to talk about. One was the Every Student Succeeds Act. Last night he told an audience that he was against Common Core. But yet, and he wants to close the Department of Education. There's a YouTube where he says that, YouTube video. But then he votes for bills like Every Student Succeeds Act. Now what that bill did, it virtually cemented Common Core into our system. Now how did it do that? You have to submit papers to the Department of Education about how your system is going to function. Well, that sounds like it's voluntary, but it's got to match what they want. If it doesn't match what they want, then you don't get approved, you don't get the funding. So the bottom line is, while it gave the appearance of being something that freed the local school boards, it really tied their hands. Another thing that he voted for that I didn't like was he's voted to pre-bail out the banks. If they get into trouble through some of these derivative companies that they've set out, it's already in place for them to get bailouts. Another thing that I didn't like, I don't like the fact that he's been voting to fund the Syrian rebels and send arms over there, and they end up linking up with ISIS. That's not something that I want to see happen. Planned Parenthood, he sent out brochures promising to stop Planned Parenthood. And some of you may have heard several times him say, well, there's nothing in that bill that says anything about Planned Parenthood. That's a partial truth. But I want to point to two things. This is a CNN report where they talk about the omnibus bill and they talk about Planned Parenthood. It's right here. I know you can't see it, but it's here. This is one that was put out by Heritage. And again, they are condemning Congress, not only for Planned Parenthood, but for other things. Now, when he tells us that he didn't vote for it, it reminds me of a comment that Groucho Marx made one time. He said, are you going to believe me or are you going to believe your own eyes? You know, here it is. It's in writing. So the choice is going to be yours, you know, whether you choose to send him back up there thinking things are going to be different, or whether you choose to send one of these four up there and try to change things. One of the things that's in that Heritage report that I'd like to read to you, it says the congressman says he didn't vote for Planned Parenthood, But here's what Heritage wrote. When it comes to leveraging the omnibus bill to govern with policy writers, Heritage experts conclude that Congress mostly disappointed. From continuing funds for abortion providers like Planned Parenthood to failing to restrict taxpayer dollars for the Obama administration's illegal and overreaching waters of the United States rule, there isn't much to laud in this bill. Now, that's from Heritage. He voted for it. I would have voted against the omnibus bill. He also voted to continue CISA. That's the Cyber Security and Information Sharing Act of 2015. Over 50 different companies, privacy organizations, were sending messages to Congress not to approve this thing, to spy on the citizens. He voted for it anyway. In the omnibus bill, what are some of the things that was in it? He voted to fully fund Obama's DREAM Act. He voted to fund sanctuary cities. He voted and funded Obama's refugee resettlement program, which brings terrorists into our state. That alone was a reason not to vote for the omnibus bill. It also funded Obamacare. There's one other thing that I want to show you. This is a listing that comes from Conservative Review and the New American Freedom Index. These are congressmen up there that have good ratings. They vote 100% with the Constitution. Down here you come to Georgia and it drops down to 75%. These guys have 100 to a 90% rating. Down here in Georgia we get down to 75. With our sitting congressman, he's at 59 under Conservative Review and he's at 67 on the Freedom Index. Folks, if this is what you want, then you need to send him back up there. I honor the Constitution. That's why I want to go. Last night, he told us his voting record honors the Constitution. Well, if you believe that, I want to give you one of these so that you can compare this to his voting record, if you'll just see me after this.
And next up is Dr. Paul Brown.
It's great being back here in Hart County. I represented y'all for 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I told you when I ran in 2007 that there would be 4 questions that I would utilize to evaluate every piece of legislation. And I pledge to you today I'll still use those same 4 questions. The first one is it right? The second, is it constitutional? The third, do we need it? The fourth, can we afford it? Now let me put some meat to those questions. The first one, is it right? Now we only have one standard of what's right and wrong, and that's what our Creator says. So is it biblically correct? Does it fit the Judeo-Christian biblical principles that our nation was founded upon? Secondly, is it constitutional? Now a lot of people claim to be voting constitutionally. In fact, even Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi claim to be operating constitutionally. But you see, in the Constitution, we have enumerated powers. Congress only has 18 things on Article 1, Section 8 that they can officially, constitutional, according to the original intent, vote upon. So is it constitutional according to the original intent? Is it one of those 18 enumerated powers? The next 2, do we need it and can we afford it, are pretty self-explanatory. I was asked over and over again, Dr. Brown, how has it been that you didn't drink the water in Washington, D.C.? Why didn't you knuckle under to the establishment up there? Well, there's those 4 questions. Very quickly after I got there, the people who were running our party, I hate to call them leaders because they really are leading us off the cliff economically, but the establishment found that I made that pledge to you. And they couldn't twist my arm enough to get me to vote for something that did not have a resounding yes to all 4 of those questions. And that's exactly how I'll continue to vote as your congressman here in the 9th Congressional District. Because I voted that way, I've been rated at times as being the most conservative member of the entire U.S. House of Representatives. When I was first elected, I had people here in Hart County ask me, how many true conservatives are there in Washington? At the time, there were 2 of us in the House, 1 in the Senate. that voted according to the original intent of the Constitution. It was my good friend, Dr. Ron Paul, in the House, and me, and then in the Senate, it was a U.S. Senator from right across the river, Jim DeMint, good friend of mine. The good news is there are more today. There are a lot more today than there were then. I was asked how many conservatives are there, and I would say 20 to 40. Today there are about 80, maybe 100. It depends on the vote. But for over a year now, I've had people all across this district encourage me to run for this U.S. House seat. I've represented 11 of the 20 counties. This is the most conservative congressional district in Georgia. It's the third most conservative congressional district in the nation. Mr. Skupine just gave you some ratings. Mr. Collins is rated F in both of those ratings. I've got an A+. I was always in the 90s. I was always in the top handful of members of Congress. Heritage Action always had me in the top 2 or 3. And it's because of those 4 questions. Folks, we've got to stop this out-of-control government that the establishment in Washington, D.C. that Doug Collins is a part of. There's no reason whatsoever he should have ever voted for that omnibus bill. Now, he gives some whiny excuses about water, but they could have gotten that out of the bill and still voted no. And I'll let you in on a little secret. A lot of the leadership pandering members of Congress will tell the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you've got my vote. You've got my vote. If you need it, I'm going to wait to the end of the vote series. And if you need my vote to pass it, I'll vote with you. But if you don't, I'm going to vote for the people in my district. I'm going to vote the way that they want me to. People all over this district are just absolutely livid at Doug Collins because he voted for that omnibus bill, as well as they voted for John Boehner in 2013. After seeing John Boehner through the first Congress when he was Speaker, I didn't vote for him. I voted for Allen West. I wanted somebody to get in the president's face and say, Mr. Obama, we're not going to do that. We're going to put this country back on the right course. We're going to do what's right to restore fiscal sanity. And I knew that Allen West would do that. But John Boehner is a go-along to get along guy. He's a deal maker. Folks, we've got to stop this out-of-control government. That's what I fought for when I was your congressman. That's exactly what I'll do. So the choice is clear. We have an establishment congressman who's pandered to the so-called leadership in the U.S. House, who's gone to the mat for John Boehner, now for Paul Ryan. But I'll go to the mat for you. I'll go to the mat for you for our future generations. We've got to stop this out-of-control spending, this out-of-control debt. I've never voted for an omnibus bill. I've never voted for a tax increase. I've never voted to raise the debt ceiling. And in fact, John Boehner and company and the establishment gave Barack Obama a blank check that had no money caps, only a time limit. Folks, the establishment need to go home. We need to put people in Washington that are going to stand firm on the Constitution. So vote for Paul Brown, the people's congressman, not the establishment congressman. And if you don't remember my name, just vote alphabetically in the U.S. House race. Vote Paul Brown to be your congressman to save America. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Okay, everybody look this way and smile. Okay, thank you. Roger Fitzpatrick is next on our agenda.
My name is Roger Fitzpatrick, and I am a candidate for Georgia's 9th District congressional seat. I am a lifelong resident of Northeast Georgia, having been born and raised in White County. When I graduated from White County High School, I joined the Marine Corps and spent some time serving our country in that manner. When I got out of the service, when I went into the reserves, then I went to college and got my education degree at the University of Georgia. Got my master's degree at North Georgia College, and then I got my specialist degree from the University of Georgia. Went into education, teaching in White County Middle School. Loved middle school students. 7th graders were my favorite. After 14 years, I went into administration at the elementary school level, and then in 2012, I retired as an elementary school principal, Mossy Creek Elementary in White County. Also in 2012, I decided that it's time for me to run for Congress. Back in 2012, we had an open seat. Started off with 5 candidates running for that seat, and then actually 3 of us qualified, Mr. Collins, Martha Zoller, and myself. Had a great time going around the 9th District, 20-plus counties, meeting good people, seeing the values that people hold dear. And that was one of my favorite things about running in 2012. Hard, but it was a good time, because I never would have met thousands of people had I not decided to put my name on the ballot in 2012. Fast forward here to 2014, and I found that I was in a struggle. What am I supposed to do? Because I found that Mr. Collins was not voting according to the principles that he promised that he would do in 2012. See, there was one major overriding thing that was discussed in 2012, and that was the Constitution. We will adhere. I mean, all three of us. The Constitution is the way, the Constitution. And if you really think about it, what did the founders give us? But they gave us a blueprint. They gave us a formula. They gave us a system of government that had never before been tried, and when it was implemented fully, the United States of America became the exceptional nation in the history of mankind. Why do you think the United States of America became the greatest nation on the face of the earth? And it had everything to do with what the founders gave us. And so in 2012, when that was the major thing that the 3 candidates were saying, this is what I will do, this is what I will do, I will adhere to the Constitution, I will adhere to the original intent. I will vote every time according to what the rule of law says, and that is the Constitution of the United States. And I got to looking at that over the 3+ years that Mr. Collins has been serving in Congress, and I had to come to the conclusion that he had let us down. And I tell you what, I struggled with this. You know, while I joined and enjoyed the race in 2012, it was hard. Working a full-time job and trying to run in 20 counties, it's tough. And so being faced with that again, I hesitated. I struggled. I fought. And it finally came down to one Sunday morning in January 10th. Never will forget the day. Started off that morning, and it was absolutely no way am I going to do this again. And then when I got to church and our pastor gets up there and he starts preaching, and it's like God was speaking directly to me. And my wife and I were just staring at each other. I've got to do this. And so here we are. And I'm doing it for this reason. That same day, I had to finally came to this question: who's fighting for me? Who's fighting for you? Who's fighting for your children? Who's fighting for your grandchildren? Who is fighting for the posterity of this nation? Because, see, that's what our founders really did this, why they did what they did. They didn't do it for themselves. They did in part, but the main reason that they wanted to establish this government was for us. And I've got to ask you, are we handing the next generation anything that is going to be better than what we received? And I've got to say no. I want to read to y'all some figures that it scares me. In 2015, 52% of our spending was made up of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Obamacare, and 52% of all of our spending. Mandatory spending and interest on the debt. By 2020, 4 years from now, that will consume 75% of the budget. 75%. Interest on the debt. This year, $225 billion. In 9 years, it will balloon to $772 billion. Just interest, not paying any of it down, just interest. And then this is the scariest part. By 2033, if nothing is done, entitlements and interest on the debt will consume all revenues. We won't have money for defense. We won't have money for transportation. We won't have money for education. We won't have money for anything. And let me ask you something. Who is fighting to make sure that this is not our future? Who is fighting to make sure that we can give to our children, that we can give to our grandchildren a better future than what is on the horizon right now? And I finally had to say, I've got to join the fight, because we are in a fight for the soul of this nation. We're in a fight for those who are coming after us so that they can have and enjoy the fruits of living in the United States of America, the greatest nation. I don't want this nation to fail. I don't want it to become a byword among the nations of the earth. I want it to continue to be a shining light and a beacon on a hill so that everybody else in the world can look here and they can say, that's what I want. Thank you very much.
By the way, we thank HTC TV for being here tonight. We're going to make everybody in South Carolina watch this. Next up is Congressman Collins.
Oh, no. Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hope y'all are doing good. I'm glad I came tonight. Because if I didn't be here, I just want to say that, there's a balance to everything in life. And no, I didn't shave my horns off before I walked in. Sometimes campaigns are great. I know some candidates are running for the first time. You think, oh, this is terrible, and we've talked about this. This is actually democracy. You don't talk about the founders, you don't talk about the Constitution. This is exactly what we do. This is what we do. We come and give ideas. We give thoughts. We talk about each other. We talk about the ideas that are presented. And when we come together, that's really what this is all about. Every time I come to this room, I learn something different. I've been in this room many times. Had the privilege of representing the people here and the things and the ideas. And so for the first part here, after we discuss some things that were said earlier, but I want to talk about things that we've accomplished, because I think sometimes we just look at those things. And I remember standing in this room less than 4 months ago. Many in this room had got a letter from the Corps of Engineers saying that, just arbitrarily another government agency is going to take away irrigation, private irrigation. They're going to take it away, not even give you the chance to even have input or consult. We stood in this room, about hundreds of us all standing here. We talked about it. The Corps presented it. Didn't talk about anything that was worth anything. We got on the phone with them, and by Wednesday, we got it changed. That's action. That's actually taking the concerns of the constituents and going to Washington, D.C. and doing something about it. But also this fact about South Carolina watching TV. It was interestingly said the other night, and a question came up on orphan counties. 3, to their credit, said they didn't know what it was. I respect that. But I thought it was interesting the answer from your former congressman, who said something about TV and then went off on Windstream, which is a broadband company, which is an internet issue that is in other parts of the district. And then we've dealt with, and we're working with, in fact, meeting with the CEO come next week on that issue. The reason, though, that Hart and Stevens and Franklin and Elbert now have the ability to at least get with their local governments and their local communities and say, do we want to be able to see Atlanta TV, or do we want to be stuck in a market of South Carolina, is because that we, through leadership, put into the Stellar Authorization Act, the Satellite Reauthorization Act, a provision that allows you now to petition to change your DMA. So that you, local control, get to decide that. No longer the Nielsen ratings, no longer the federal government. You get to decide that. You see, these are things when you get to Washington and you listen to the people, you understand your district and you work on it. You work on those ideas. You see, because the Corps just doesn't deal here in Hartwell, it deals in Lake Lanier. We're fortunate enough to have both of basically the headwaters of both the Savannah River and the Chattahoochee Basin. So we work with those ideas. We built a relationship, and that's what it means to work together. That's what it means to take ideas and say, we're going to accomplish something. Now, again, you've heard a lot tonight, and I respect the guys running. I just don't respect when they don't tell the truth. And I think that's the only issue that we got to deal with here tonight. So let's talk a little bit about some things that was heard. Education Success Act was brought up. That's an interesting thing because most who deal with education, and most who deal with, look at it, including the governor of Utah, also many in Washington, D.C., look at it, is the first restraints that were put on Common Core or even the federal overreaches starting in education. It was a step forward on reauthorization of every child, no child left behind. Now, here's the choice. You could have voted for progress, and we did. We got significant gains in this, and we also have specifically written out in the bill, federal government cannot use any tool or coercion to make states deal with Common Core. It's in the bill. Done it before, it's signed. Or here's your choice. Vote no and let the president continue to issue waivers to every state that wants one. Now, I don't know about you, but I would rather have Congress do its constitutional duty, pass a bill that makes significant changes instead of leaving it to the Obama administration. Now, when you understand also that you talk about, and there's one vote, and I take thousands of votes. We've talked about this issue, talk about the omnibus. Now, what is interesting here is the former congressman says, I'm going to give a whiny answer about water. Again, it tells me that if you represent people, the state of Georgia and our district, there's never a whiny answer when you represent your state. And if that's the way he feels, that should be a big reflection on him asking for his job back. Because what happened is Richard Shelby put in language that actually removed and would have removed Georgia's ability in the water wars and could have left us in the Atlanta area in a situation in which we go back to rationing. You may like your water. I remember the time we got the Manguson ruling and we were looking at the possibility of rationing to 1950 and 60 levels out of that area. That's a job on economic development. That's a killer for what we have. Now, at the other point in time, we've also brought up Planned Parenthood. We brought up this issue, and let's just talk about it real quickly. No, they talk about, was it in there? They talk about Heritage talking about it. I'm going to talk about National Right to Life. I'm going to talk about Georgia Life Alliance. I'm going to talk about the Susan B. Anthony group. I'm going to talk about the Family Research Council with Tony Perkins, who all I have with them, you're going to talk about ratings, perfect ratings with them. Because they understood this is not the place you get it. You didn't get it Planned Parenthood under mandatory spending. Paul's been in Congress longer than I have. He doesn't know the rules. I'm not going to teach them to him now. Rule 21 would not let us get it mandatory spending. We have the other way to do it. Now, do you think that if there was any way we could have stopped a horrific organization like Planned Parenthood in the omnibus, all of these would have reacted and scored everything? They didn't. That should tell you something. Heritage says one thing, I'll trust the ones fighting for life. But while we speak on life, because this is a slap at me, I was on both conference committees in the state of Georgia that passed pro-life legislation in the state of Georgia. I voted for the fetal pain bill in the United States Congress. The only meaningful rep that we've had to actually take a stab at abortion. You know who Paul Brown voted with? Nancy Pelosi. The only chance he had to stand for life, he chose to let the unborn down. Now, if you want to get up here and talk about funding for Planned Parenthood, the real chance you had, you chased a false hope. You let the unborn down. When you look at these other issues that we talk about, folks, the issues of money and spending, sanctuary cities, these are all the things that sanctuary cities are stuff that we passed out of the House. Can't get the Senate to move on. I've been before you in your legislative updates. I've talked to you about that. I'm ready for the Senate to do away with the filibuster so that we can pass. You name your issue, we passed it in the House. And getting it through the Senate to get it to this president's desk so he can show his true colors. Get it over there. If he wants to veto it, veto it. But that's the constitutional way. So the course is clear. I've kept my promise. I said it was about Jordan, Copeland, and Cameron. That's my three kids because they represent the kids and the nieces and the nephews and everybody else in this room and their future. Vote for Doug Collins. I've kept my word. Thank you.